There's a pattern I started noticing, but I don't fully trust it yet. A while back, we picked up 32 wheel and a C6 LS2 from Exhaust Work. A few people thought the number was exaggerated, and to be fair, the comparison wasn't stock versus stock. That car had test pipes in place of the cats, but we weren't undoing a factory exhaust. It actually had a well-known aftermarket system. Still, big gain, but they were variables. But what stuck with me wasn't the number, it was the layout. We designed step sections in the exhaust, 275 into 3-inch, and multiple velocity changes instead of one straight shot. So when this third gen Camaro came in with an LS3 swap, long tube, standalone EFI, and a popular aftermarket system already on it, I wasn't looking for horsepower, I was kind of looking for confirmation. Because this car didn't have catalytic converters holding it back. It had headers straight into a performance exhaust that most people would consider done. It already sounded good. It already made 392 at the tire. And on paper, there wasn't much left on the table. But the graph told a different story. It wasn't clean, the engine didn't sound free. And I've learned something that when it sounds slightly choked on a naturally aspirated motor, that usually means there's air trying to get out that can't. Rather than just making it louder or bigger, we changed how the exhaust transitions as it moves through the car. Same engine, same headers, same packaging problems that everybody complains about. And if you're watching closely, you'll probably catch why this one didn't behave like most of them do. Most people probably won't notice it first time through, and that's fine. But if there's something to this velocity step idea, this is where it should show itself, since we've got no emissions bottleneck and no stock comparison excuse. Just headers into a well-known aftermarket system versus a purpose-built one. And if you care about how exhaust actually works and not how loud it is, stick around. Let's see if this theory holds up. So of course, what we need to do before we get started with any exhaust work is figure out what this thing is making. Now, when this car got here, originally the owner was just looking for an exhaust, but he knew that there were a few things that weren't quite right with the setup. Now, what I believe this thing has is a LS3 with all of the go fast, naturally aspirated goodies. Headers, fast intake manifold, 102 millimeter throttle body, poly EFI, and I'm sure some sort of camshaft in it. I'll have to get specifics, but with that said, you could be sure that this thing should put out some decent power. However, when we got it here, we noticed that it wasn't quite running that well, and right away we were able to identify as part of diagnostics a crank sensor that was incorrect. It had the wrong style pickup for the reluctor wheel, for the pickup wheel that was in the car. So I don't even know how it was running as well as it did when it got here, but it was cutting out, it was jumping all over the place. The other thing we noticed was the throttle position sensor wasn't quite set up correctly. And before we could even do anything else, we had to look at the tune because there was a few settings in there that were making the thing go a little bit crazy. Running a ton of timing in the area where it comes down off throttle, which would make it bump up really high, and it would basically have some sort of hang, wouldn't let it get down to idle quick enough. So we had to smooth that area out. I didn't want to touch too much because I want to see truly where this car is at before we start. But we're here, we're on the dyno. Let's see what kind of numbers this thing puts out. All right, I'm going to be honest. This thing sounds pretty dang good, and it's making some decent power. However, this graph looks a little funky, a little wavy, and it sounds a bit choked up for me, and I've been doing this long enough to know kind of what that sounds like, although it does sound good. So the idea here is that it sounds good already. I want to try to improve flow, maybe make it a little less choked up, make some power in this thing, which I think I can, just knowing kind of where these cars are, and keep it sounding as good or better if we can. But this graph, these waves, looking at the tune before, I kind of noticed a few weird areas in the timing and the fueling that I think we're going to also be able to take advantage of. But I'm going to show you guys one thing at a time, and the next thing to show you is Cody getting on this exhaust. All right, so we got a 6.2 LS, unsure exactly what motor in there. This is actually a pretty decently done resto mod here. Few areas that we're probably gonna have to be mindful of if we wanna get an exhaust that's gonna sound better than what he's got on here. The current setup he's not happy with, which why he is employing us to. And the idea here is to get him the best possible sound. And I really don't think that this setup's bad for, I mean, for flow, it probably could be optimized. There's probably maybe 15 horsepower in this neck down section that goes up and over. I mean, this is way too small here. Is that a single 3-inch? He probably had to know that though.
Yeah, this looks like it's 4-inch. That neck's down to 3. And the rest of the system is 3-inch.
The issue though is that unlike the other F-body cars that we've done, we don't have turbos that are distorting the sound pulses. So ideally this thing needs to be dual in order to get up and over the axle here. Luckily though, he's got the Panhard bar kit, which should give us a little bit more room than we're used to dealing with. This has got a nice bend in it, which means we've got room to go up. So there's actually a lot of room there, but then that begs the question when we get to the rear about muffling and how we can do that effectively. I'm unsure if he wants valves as of this point right now, or exactly what he's looking for, or exactly what this system was doing, because he's got this wide dumping out to here and then this side going through a muffler. Doesn't seem like a good recipe for a clean sound, but that is why he's here. Big issue though I see is this area here. We're pretty much maxed out on 3-inch going through this section. What I'm thinking that a possible solution would be stepping this down to 275. This one, I think we have a similar issue in this tunnel here. Oh, that'd be asymmetrical.
Yeah, and this one's already touching the trans support.
Which isn't the end of the world, but it is tight. Obviously the drive shaft goes up when the car is underweight, so that gives us a little more clearance. So this, say our X is a little wider, this shifts over a little bit more to here, flattens out, back in. We almost have to kick them both to the side immediately. Yeah, this is a lot more challenging because there's just a lot of little tweaks you have to do along this way. Although once we get here, it pretty much opens up, and this area is not going to be the challenge. It's just getting something that's going to sound nice in this area. Ideally, we want the X as close as possible, but the problem being fitting megaphones and the X in here, because let's just say we got the X closer up here to get through here, but then we're not going to get megaphones in that area. Which means we shift them further to the back. If we get the megaphones in this area, then we've got to shift the X. It would just be a lot of work, just because you have to keep this flat in a tight X together and then keep these pipes next to each other going up over. I just don't want this thing to run away. There isn't a whole lot of room to put. It's like if we do a single, it solves a lot of these problems, but it's just like, I don't think that's going to be the best for this car, like signature sound wise. Like it's fine for a turbo car, it's fine for a twin turbo car, but I don't think it's necessarily fine for an NA car that's going to continue to be NA. And then for the rear, because we have to come out to some sort of dual, it just does not leave us a lot of room for muffling. And then I always hate how when you do this setup and you get to them, one side's inevitably going to be longer than the other, even if you're trying to keep it dual, which, well, not the end of the world, it just always looks like an afterthought, especially in this day and age of people thinking that equal length is like the end all, the be all. it is nice if you can do it, but sometimes it's just not, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. But it actually might be on this setup if we could fit it in there. Two 3-inch ultra quiets wouldn't be enough here to control it from droning. And even if we went to a bigger setup, something similar, a street power, there'd be a lot of room.
So he's kind of got something similar to a street power. This is a boreless system. The street powers are a little bit thicker and they work a little bit better than the boreless do.
Do we have any street powers here?
Not that I know of. I'll check.
It's more how we'd get back, because if we have them both in this place, we'd have to get one of the pipes back over here afterwards. So the further out they are, the more we're gonna have to start that loop to come back.
Are we doing a same side exit?
I'll have to talk with the owner and see what he was thinking on tips, but the way I envision this is at least duals, if not quads. Did you hear anything back on this from the?
Not yet.
Okay. This is actually a really tough one. To do it right requires like a lot of fitting to do something that like I think would make a big enough difference sound quality wise. Because I wouldn't want to just do it like, we don't just do exhaust, like, it's not just, oh well, we could do this here, like, it's not why it comes here. It comes here for the best that we could possibly do. But I think people are kind of used to seeing dual exits on these cars. It's kind of the style and flow, but that doesn't give us the ability to step down, because stepping down is what does the biggest mitigation of drone. Oh, this is actually a lot tougher, even though it's very simple. It's very simple, which is probably why so many of these are done wrong, because you just do what you can do in this area and not necessarily try to fit what would fit best. But that's why it's here. So I think we'd have to get to this point and see what they do. But
Gotta make it sound really good.
so let's plan on doing the X, doing the 275, the megaphones where we can get them, possibly talking to him about redoing the placement of the fuel line, and then doing this flip around setup in the rear. Do you got an idea of kind of what I'm talking about mostly?
Yeah, I think I got a...
Why don't you draw it out and count the materials and stuff like that, and then let's reassess after that.
Cool. Sounds good. Oh, it's flanges. Let's get some flanges on here. The slip joint stuff is impossible to get off. All right. Now we're getting somewhere. All right. Finally got her. Now, to never put this back up, we're gonna start using flanges. Flanges or V-bands. That way all the stuff comes off easily. You don't have any slip joint connections, which tend to leak anyway. Flanges.
All right, so the exhaust is down, and already we're running into issues with the build that are gonna make it more difficult for us to actually get this finished. Right away, the headers that are on this vehicle run very close to the frame rail here, which might not seem like a huge deal. The problem being though is that in order for us to get some sort of clamp style on there, we need them to be longer or in a different location. We tried a flange bolt, you can see it doesn't really fit in there. It'd be touching the frame, causing noise, vibrations that we wouldn't want on our builds. Originally, what this had was a slip fit connector, which essentially just slides over. The problem with slip fit connectors, in order to get a good enough seal that they're not gonna leak and cause sound problems, rattling, other sorts of distortions, they need to be very, very tight and pushed on there. And typically when you're going to mount the exhaust, doing a slip fit, it's very destructive to the shape of the pipe. They don't like to come on and off very often. And it's just something that we don't feel is necessarily professional when you're doing a job like this, or what people have come to expect us to output. That being said, we need to get some sort of either extension or flange on this thing, but we're just not seeing great ways. We were thinking about maybe taking the motor mount bolts off, lifting it up so Cody can get a weld around this. Honestly, looking at this thing, I think we're gonna have to take the header down, which increases the time that we have to spend on this build to mechanical instead of just fabrication. So it's one of those things that we don't like to dive into because that increases the cost for the customer. But in order to do this right and to do it to the level that we expect it to be done and the customer expects from us, we're probably gonna have to move this header down so that way we can figure out what we're gonna do with the extension, with the flange, to get something on here that seals up but is easily removable in the future.
All right, so you guys saw how difficult it was and how much I don't like that slip fit type connection. And in that area, it was super tight where I can't just put a V-band or some flange on there. So this is my solution. We're gonna put this tube onto the collector. We're gonna kind of get it out in a spot where we can safely put a flange. It's not gonna hit anything or touch anything. Then we have to bring the header down, tack this guy onto that, weld it up, then we're gonna put it back into place. So this is kind of like the rough idea. This is where I got, and let's go see if it fits. All right, so as you guys can see, we're in a nice safe area. We're not gonna touch anything. We're not gonna hit anything. We can put a flange here and we're gonna have plenty of room. The only concern at this point is if I tack this on here, are we going to be able to remove the header and put it back into place without difficulty? Or are we gonna have to like drop the motor mount or something crazy that I don't also want to add on to this. So we're gonna tack this guy in place, try and pull the header down and see if we can get it all the way out, weld it, and back in without any fuss. All right, well, it doesn't look like the header's gonna be able to come out. So what I'm gonna do, position this in a spot where I can kind of get here, weld everything all the way around, and then put it back in. So let's grab some welding stuff and weld it up in place.
Now, even though they share a similar torque arm suspension, compared to the later F bodies that we did, the big differentiation here is the turbochargers in what we're trying to achieve with the sound profile and essentially what our end packaging is going to be in this exhaust system that we're building here. Now, the main issue that we're having is that because this is naturally aspirated, I want to try to keep this a more dual orientated system instead of going to a big single like we did with the turbos. And because of that, it's adding some packaging constraints and some things that we're running into, mainly with the rear muffler. Now, the way everybody does it, the way this thing came in is you have the big single coming in the side, it splits in the muffler, comes out the sides. Some people do the Y-pipe here, going to two smaller mufflers. There's a few ways to do it, but there really isn't very much variance on these third gens and even the later F bodies. And the fact that the car is here means that we've got to come up with something creative that's going to get him more flow, but we try to keep the sound that he had, because admittedly the car had some pretty good sound. So we went through a lot of tweaking and trying to figure out, measuring, checking space constraints. What I think we're going to come up with, which gives a premium over what he had, is a valved system. Now what we're gonna use is a big dual inlet, dual outlet, but kind of reverse the function where one side is going one way and the other side is going the other way. What we're gonna do, we're gonna get over the axle, normal FMU smooth merge X-pipe megaphones. Once we get over the axle, we're gonna keep them real tight, real close together, and that's where we get into the fun part, right? One side is going to go in one direction of the muffler and come out. The other side is gonna wrap around and go out to the other side. We're going for possibly quad tips here. We might change it up at the last second, but essentially we're going to have 4 outlets. Now where it gets tricky is doing the Y-pipe to a valved section to try to give some additional choice on volume for this customer over what he had before, meaning that we will have a true silence to violence mode. Now, this looks easy to draw and easy to put there, but actually packaging this thing is going to be much, much harder. Cody's got his work cut out for him, and it might seem like this car's been there, done that. It's going to take a lot of metal and a lot of work just to get these ideas slammed into this body.
I just finished up this X-pipe. We've got the megaphones that are ready to go in, and at this point, still kind of have to determine where the best place is to put these megaphones. And just because of the amount of room that we don't have on this car, I have to see if we're gonna be able to put the megaphones after the X, or if we're gonna have to put the megaphones before the X. So let's kind of go put this guy over by the car, fit everything up, and see how it's gonna work out. All right, so right away, we're running into a drive shaft here. The other side is gonna be fine, but we have obviously a problem here. I can either kind of lower this guy down a little bit, but then we're gonna be kind of getting lower than I want to. This might end up being what we do. I'm definitely gonna have to run this by OJ because this X-pipe is gonna be way further back than he normally likes it to be. I haven't done too many megaphone before the X setup, so it actually might sound pretty good, but let's go grab OJ and see what he thinks.
Really, the name of the game in this car, Cody, is just trying to fit what we can where we can. And ultimately, I think that's the biggest thing a lot of people forget about exhaust flow and exhaust tone is that you're not just dealing with a open vehicle that you can do anything you want with. You have to deal within the constraints of the vehicle, and that dictates really the whole build. So getting the X-pipe and the megaphones in this area presents a unique challenge over the other F-bodies you did in the past.
Yeah, right, yeah. This car's already kind of low to the ground. This was the, I know we like to normally put the X-pipe as close as to the engine as possible, but we're already kind of running into an issue here, and then if we're just not fitting. So we're probably gonna have to end up doing the megaphones first, and then doing an X-pipe right after.
Now, I think we're still higher than the system that came in.
Right.
So even though it looks like it's close to the drive shaft, once you get some weight in this thing, I think it's gonna shift the thing upwards, give us more room for the drive shaft to where you can put the megaphones, but still, I think it's gonna be megaphones, X-pipe, but really cut it back, lift it up, like whatever you can do to keep this thing tucked as much as you can get it, if that makes sense.
Right, so I can shave off 2 inches on this guy. We have 2 inches on either side of the X-pipe, so there's 6 inches right then and there, which should put us in a better area, closer, away from the drive shaft. And then obviously, like you said, like once this thing is down and loaded up, the drive shaft's gonna be probably 4 inches higher.
And maybe go into a harder radius here and then back out might get you, but I think that's gonna affect the sound quality too. So I kind of like what you came up with for this. It's just a matter of where this stuff will fit.
All right, so after discussing with OJ, he gave me a good idea to kind of shorten everything up a little bit. So what we're gonna end up doing is we're gonna take 1 3/4 inches off of each end of this X-pipe, which is gonna give us a little bit of extra room. We're gonna take 1 3/4 inches off of the other pipe that goes to this X-pipe. We're gonna kind of scoot everything back almost 6 inches. It's gonna give us a whole lot more room. So let's get this guy cut up and make everything fit better. So we just finished up the start of the mid pipe. In all of its glory. Let's put this guy on and then start finishing up the rest of this mid pipe and get to that muffler. All right, so we just kinda got the rest of this mid pipe figured out, and I had to change it a bunch of times, and I was kind of back and forth with ideas and talking with OJ. I think I finally got it figured out, plumbed the way that I wanted it to, and we're still gonna have plenty of room between the gas tank and the bar and everything else. Everything should fit. At this point, everything's kind of tacked together from the megaphone back. So I'm gonna actually break the tacks off from the megaphone, pull individual tube down, weld the whole thing up solid, put it back onto the megaphone, tack it up, do the other side, and then once I get all of that welded, it'll make life a lot easier All right, so I just got done discussing with OJ the muffler placement and some other things, how everything's gonna fit. What we kind of decided is we're gonna have one side follow the fuel tank, and it's gonna 180 into one of the ends of the muffler, and then it's gonna come out and go out the back. The other side is gonna come in to the other side and then go out the back. So we need to have a 180 degree, which we didn't really account for, but thankfully we have 290s, we can cut them up and we can make a 180. Sometimes it doesn't work, but in this case it should work out. So we're gonna cut these guys up, weld them together, and then we're gonna go make sure everything fits the way that we need it to. All right, so we got the 180 degree bend on here, and this is going to allow for a good space between the muffler, and then this distance is going to offset it from the panhard bar to the gas tank. It's gonna be pretty much perfect. All we have to do now is do a straight piece and bend in to get to the outlet part of the exhaust that goes into this, and then we should be able to make the muffler stationary and start building the rest of the system.
So a lot of times you have an idea and you go to execute it and maybe it doesn't come out exactly the way you are, and this is one of the times we're gonna show you when that sort of thing happens. Now, the customer had one request, which was to do some sort of downturn. He wasn't super interested in having tips. So being that this is a earlier F body and we kind of were playing into that whole vibe, I guess you could say, Cody had come up with a pretty neat idea of doing the earlier Pontiac style exhaust downturn tips, where it more or less looks like this coming down. This is a 45, they're more like a 60, but more or less you get the idea. That's now, we do have these two different sized outlets, and we were thinking that it still might look pretty good, but the problem that I'm having once this is set up is that when you get behind it, there's so much exposed that it kind of takes away from the discreteness of what downpipes are. You're going to be seeing both of these pipes, all of this running into it, and it's just gonna kind of have a very busy look that isn't what downturns are about. Downturns are about simplicity, having it there, and then having those two there where they're staring at you, where you're riding behind the car, and it just kind of looks, just busy is the best way I could put it. Wasn't exactly thrilled with how that came out, so the issue now is like, what do we do? Do we redo it? Do we do them side by side? Do we stick them up into the body? Cody did all of that work. Is there any way we could save it? So kind of my idea, what we came up with is using a longer pipe here and going back to more or less still a downturn, but instead of having dual downturns, we're going to fish mouth this guy into this pipe, having this still be the downturn so you can see from behind. So that way when you look behind the car, it kind of hides the two pipes and looks like a single downturn like you'd see on an earlier muscle car, especially of this era, which I think will simplify the back look of the bumper because there's a lot of pipes going on and you really don't want this thing looking too busy, too technical. You want everything to be clean, look like it was designed with purpose as opposed to just pipes going every which way. So I think this is going to simplify it a little bit, give it more of a discreet look, but still look like something technical is going on behind there.
All right, so we finally got this thing tacked up. It was quite challenging trying to get everything to fit right, especially with two little connection points that have to be flat. So whenever you're welding stuff like this, tacking it likes to twist, warp, change, so you always have to keep that in mind. Every little bit counts. The biggest issue that I was having was with the valve system and then getting that into the muffler on both ends. Finally got everything tacked. I had to remove it, put it back on, probably like 50 times. And I think it's gonna be pretty good. It's gonna go in, it's gonna come out. It should be pretty good. The other part that I had a little bit of trouble with was fitting up the quiet side into the loud side. That's a nice big 45 cope that goes into the 3-inch. Being a little bit different sizes also doesn't help too much either. But We got it figured out. It should work great. At this point, it's all ready to weld up. I should have plenty of tacks to kind of keep everything from warping. So let's weld this thing up, put it back on the car, and then see what it sounds like.
All right, so we've got the car back on the dyno, got it all strapped in and set to go. Now, I told you guys before that when I heard the 392, it kind of sounded a little choked up to me. And really, that's honestly just my professional experience of what I'm hearing the exhaust note do versus the car, knowing the diameter of that thing, knowing what's going on. I suspected there was gonna be some power in there, so we're gonna run it, we're gonna find out. And then afterwards, we're going to tune to optimize it. Now this thing has a Holley standalone EFI, and while there might not be a ton in there, there might be some additional refinement that we can find using the dyno, because I believe this thing was street tuned before possibly. On the dyno, it's gonna allow us to just get a much more tighter calibration. We did have some issues before we even started with some weird timing in some of the lower end areas that was causing the car to kind of idle hunt and fluctuate around. That had to be corrected, but I didn't really touch anything else in the tune. This was just to get it operating. Once we're gonna do it, we're gonna see what the exhaust did, and then after that, we're gonna tune and see if we can get a little bit more power. Maybe it'll change the way the car sounds a little bit. I doubt it, but can we beat that original sound that it came in? It sounded pretty good, just sounded a little choked up. And can we make more power? Let's find out. Surprising to say the least. The numbers are almost unbelievable. A 32 wheel horsepower gain with just an exhaust, and I don't really know what to say. Now, I expected that it was going to be choked up just because of the 2-into-1 design. We went into a true dual, more or less, with the X-pipe, obviously. Then even in the back, it still is a true dual, even though it has one muffler. They're just sharing sides. So we opened it up quite a bit, showing that this thing was more than likely restricted. So we're not really gaining power as much as we are opening power up, unrestricting the power, releasing the limiter that was the exhaust that was on there. And overall, I'd say the tone is pretty dang good. It definitely sounds meaner idle. It's still clean. It's still got a bark, and he's got a valve now, which shuts it, keeps it more refined. So I'm really pretty impressed with these numbers. If I didn't see it, I wouldn't believe it. However, with that said, there might be a little bit more power inside of the tune. We're gonna check it out. I've got my friend Bader on call from Kuwait. We're gonna dive into this Holley EFI engine management system and see if we can crack out maybe a few more. All right, so Bader's wrapped up with the tune and half a horsepower away from a 50 wheel horsepower gain. Now let's get into actually what we're seeing. First off, we've got the 392 run, and if you look carefully here, you can see that before we were coming in, it's possible that we might have lost some low end. Now, being that we stepped up piping diameter of the exhaust, that naturally is going to slow exhaust gas velocity down, and the reason for that is that as the air comes in, it has a void to fill, and that void actually slows it down. It kind of fights itself until it gets up speed, starts pushing. That push then also pulls the exhaust all the way through, creating more flow towards the end of the run, which is why you see all these gains up top. But honestly, the car's not shifting before 3,700, so this is all usable power. Anything you'd lose down low would be a horsepower, 2, 3. I mean, basically you're seeing gains all the way across with this exhaust. But that's just the nature of the beast of exhaust sizing. Anytime you change the flow dynamics, the size dynamics, you're going to give up something somewhere else. And that's just the nature. In order to get all these gains up top here, we had to essentially exchange it for maybe a little bit of punch down low, but you can see torque really isn't effective. But where we can make that up is in the ECU tune. And with the ECU tune, an additional, 15, 16 wheel horsepower, we were able to get over this car that was already tuned. Now keep in mind, this is a Holley that was tuned by somebody previously, probably street tuned, so this in no way is knocking that tune. It's just we have a tool that's able to put the car under a specific load, and we're able to monitor and keep changing things. And one of the big things that we can affect is low-end torque, being that that's a very typically dangerous area to add timing into a tune. High propensity to detonate because of cylinder pressures in that area, and typically you want to add timing towards the higher RPM area. They always say don't add in timing before peak torque. Well, how do you know what torque's peaked at unless the timing's correct and you know where the car, and that's exactly the type of things that we can measure when we're dynoing, when we're putting a load on it, when we're using this. Again, 441 is a fairly impressive number on my dyno. I feel like a broken record having to say this every time, but right now I don't even have a 1% correction, meaning I'm underneath it because I have everything turned off. It's not even compensating for atmospheric conditions. And that's just the way I keep it. I know that if it's set at the bottom, then there's no fudging numbers. There's nothing that can be changed day to day. Early on with this dyno, I was noticing that when I had all those correction factors on, that I would do a run and then 2 months later, maybe there was more atmospheric pressure in the air, the temperature was different outside, and I didn't know if I made 4 horsepower or 15 between just the car being dynoed one day to the other. So a long time ago I said, I'm just gonna turn it off, then I'll never have to have questions. But people keep coming at me in the comments and telling me how my dyno should read. It's a tool. If you don't like the numbers, I don't know what to tell you, but these are impressive. This is essentially a 600 plus crank horsepower car, judging by what I see typically putting down these numbers. So probably somewhere in the area of 620, 630, something like that. Pretty impressive, to be honest. Naturally aspirated, 6.2 with all these mods, and our exhaust picked up, again, almost 20, 30. And again, our exhaust picked up 30 of that horsepower, which we were able to tune on top of that to optimize, netting us an additional 15 for a total of 49.5 horsepower. The customer's gonna be thrilled with this. But what I wanna know is, how does this thing sound in the street? Because it sounds really mean in here. It's definitely got a more race-esque tone than when it came in. Definitely had some muscle car punch. I think we actually got that a touch cleaner, and it definitely sounds a lot more free-flowing, but only street polls are really gonna let us hear what this thing's true voice sounds like. Well, we got this thing on the road, and the first thing I noticed is that this chassis, although this is a really clean version of one of these cars, it's definitely a little bit dated, at least in my opinion. They drive a little bit differently, and if you're into it, I'm sure it's a great car, but there's just a lot of things that remind me of the 80s, and I guess in a neutral way, we'll say. The lack of traction is definitely one of those things, and I will say though, right now we're cruising with the exhaust valves open, and this thing actually doing 65 right now, not a whole lot of drone. They are open, wide open, and when they're shut, it basically virtually eliminates most of the sound. Now, just driving around, I'm noticing a few things. You guys see I don't have my seatbelt on, and that's not by choice. The latch seems to be broken. The turn signals are messed up. So there's a lot of little details I'm gonna have to finish up before we call this thing good, because we just got through with the exhaust. We got through with the mechanical work, the tune, but if I drive a car and I notice something, I've got to make the customer aware of it, and I'm definitely going to on this. But you're not here for all that. You're here to hear how this thing sounds when we're under load. In the middle of the road, lay into it. It's going to be hard to get you guys a good sound clip, because right where this thing wants to make the best noise, it completely loses traction, and that was second gear. Definitely this thing's a screamer, and in third gear I'm getting a little fast. We're going pretty fast there, and I still had another 1,000 RPM. To really hear this thing, I almost have to do it from a dig and light them up, and it's just not gonna come across well like it usually does on this channel, where we can get the sound clips, but man, this thing is getting squirrely at any sort of RPM I give it to, and I'll just chalk that up to the lightweight and this thing's traction setup for the year. The owner's probably got some things to do to it, but maybe we'll try from a dig just to get you guys some sort of clip. I would say the sound is great, especially from outside, although getting it into the area it sounds great is a little bit difficult, but the chop is mean and the rev is just completely nasty when you're at idle. I'm pretty happy with this thing. The power is excellent as well. Dare I say, almost unusable, at least on this 42 degree Midwest winter day. So obviously tires are an issue, but you know, it is one of those things. If you get this thing to hook up, I bet it's going to sound really nice at the top of the RPM range, but it's just not gonna happen. I'll try it one more time. Man, that sounds mean. So now we've got a clearer picture. This car came in with 392 with a reputable aftermarket exhaust already installed. After the custom system and a proper load-based tune on the Holly, it left at 441. 32 of that came strictly from the exhaust change, and the rest came from cleaning up the timing and fueling in areas that were left conservative during the street tune. That's huge because we didn't compare this to a stock Camaro with crushed pipes and factory cats. We compared it into headers into a name brand performance system that a lot of people are perfectly satisfied with, which means we didn't make power, we removed restriction and optimized flow. The step sections played the biggest role. We narrowed to 275 where velocity and clearance demanded it, and then expanded back to 3 where volume mattered. That transition isn't random. It affects the pulse energy, it affects scavenging, and this is the second car where this layout coincides with a big cane. We did give up a couple of horsepower in the 2,000 to 3,000 range. Physics doesn't disappear. Larger cross-sectional areas change velocity at low RPM, but this engine lives above 3,700 on every shift. So the power we gained sits exactly where the owner actually uses it. We also improved the serviceability with proper flanges instead of slip fits, added electronic valve control, and cleaned up the exit so it looks period correct instead of overly designed. The sound is sharper now, less congested, still clean, but just more honest. At this point, it's hard to call this a coincidence. Third gen F-bodies are tight cars. Torque arm, pan-hard bar, shallow tunnel, fuel tank crowding, everything. And most shops build what fits and call it a day. There's nothing wrong with that. It works, but there's a difference between what fits and what's ideal. This one forced us to extend the headers in place, build custom 180s out of 90s, flip the megaphone order because of the drive shaft clearance, and rethink the downturn when it looked too busy. None of that was for show. It was the work required to make the layout match the goal. And the goal wasn't volume, it was flow and tone. If the velocity step idea keeps repeating itself, maybe this industry has been leaving something on the table by defaulting to straight diameter systems just because they're easier and cheaper to package. If you think the numbers are inflated, tell me why. If you think velocity transition matter more than most people admit, I want to hear that too. I'm not changing how I measure the dyno, but I'll happily argue exhaust theory in the comments. Stay loud, stay curious, and we'll hear you next time.